All right. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Everything seems to be working. Maybe. Oh shit! There's Dan. Dan, the man. The man. Uh, yeah, we're gonna see if the multi-stream is work or the chat is working multi-platform. I don't know if it is or not. I'm guessing it's not, but we're gonna test it out. Still not getting YouTube. I've got to get this figured out. But we're not going to worry about it right now today. As everybody knows, we are going to be talking about some tips for. Did I just write that? I guess I did. Yep. All right. We're going to be talking about tips and tricks for playing against orcs. Well, thanks for joining for the 30 seconds there, Dan. Have fun at work, buddy. Appreciate you hopping in just to say hi. I hope you had a good birthday. Happy birthday to Dan. Was yesterday. So it shows up here that we're multi-streaming, but it doesn't show up there that we are. So it's got to be just an issue with YouTube. We'll get it worked out. No worries. So yeah, as the title says, we're going to talk about how to play against orcs. It's going to be a live discussion. I do like to do these types of things live. I'm going to shift the laptop a little bit. And we like to do them live because I like for it to be a discussion. I like when we get the people getting questions in real time. So if you're on YouTube or Twitch and you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and let me know what your thoughts are. And if I get something wrong, as always, let me know. I don't get too worked up about it. It's a big game with a lot of rules, and I've been playing for multiple editions, and sometimes we just get rules confused. That being said, before we dive in, as always, big shout out to all the patrons. You know, there's a link in the description. We've got a couple new patrons, and all the patrons, I've kind of retooled the Patreon a bit. All the patrons are getting access to all my original games. And so, you know, it's a great way. $1.50 is the lowest tier. Great way to just like check out the games. I will be occasionally putting them out for play testing groups and stuff like that, but that's how you always stay up to date with everything I'm doing, just to let you know there. Okay, did my little shameless plug. Let's talk about what we're here to talk about. So, there's a lot of variables here, as always, because what you bring is going to dictate how your strategy works. So I can really only tell you what I do and how it works for me and why it works for me. I can't tell you what you need to do without or give you any advice without knowing exactly what you're bringing and without knowing exactly what you're playing against. Now I know when we look at like what is quote unquote meta, there's just some things there that are tough to get over, right? Like Squig Hog Boys are a little rough for Army to kind of get through because of what they bring to the table. They're T7, they're what? 3 wounds, 5 up, feel no pain, I think. Let's check that. I think they're a 5. I think all the other stuff is a 6, but I think the Squig Hog Boys are a 5. I haven't put my orcs on the table in a while, and actually I don't even really have many anymore. I decided to go ahead and trade them. I got tired of them sitting on the shelf because I had just been playing so much Drukhari. And so I was just like, you know, I'd rather somebody else get to put these to work. So one of my buddies, he and I did a trade, maybe temporary, maybe permanent, but that's why I like keeping things in the local community as much as I can because we can all kind of bounce things around and we all get to, it's just a fun way to do it. So, 5 up, feel no pain. That's what I thought. So they could be a little tough to chew through. You know, and T7 means like your witches are going to wound them on 6s, 5s at best. 5 up, feel no pain means it could be really hard to get that damage through. Do they still have the invuln? I don't think they do. They do not. They have a 4 up save, but no invuln. So there's some things there, right? Like we have some respite. There are ways around it. boys can be a little rough just because of the sheer amount of wounds and bodies and the T5 and then the -1 to wound strat, obviously, that they can layer on them. Knobs are probably one of the hardest things for Army to chew through because they're just always -1 to wound. And they can, at 2 wounds, they can really soak more punishment than they should be able to. And, a lot of Orc players are playing, I shouldn't say a lot. Locally, Orc players are playing a lot of 10 knobs, right, with a war boss just to get those extra two units of them, maybe even. So they've got the big brick of -1 to wound bodies that they don't have to spend CP on. They can give them the +2 inches to their movement, which I think is called Follow Me. And then they also have access to the other enhancement that lets them fall back and charge. And then I think those were the 2 big enhancements for those. So there's just a lot of weird resilience and a lot of bodies for a lot of board control. And they can be really hard to handle because if they get the jump on you, they throw out so many dice, and at T3, 1 wound, 4 up save at best. Like, we're just picking up whole units every time we get tagged. I do have the benefit of being able to play against one of the best Orc players I've ever met, period. And ITC would also back that up. Like, he is a highly ranked Orc player. He is way higher ranked as an Orc player than I ever was. Although there was a period where he and I were having competitions to see who could do better, constantly one-upping each other. But as far as an Orc player goes, he's definitely a better Orc player than I am. And big shout out to him. Like, he's an incredible human. Love playing with him, and I learned so much. And I'd like to think that he learns a lot when we play. Like, we just both learn from each other. So enough tooting his horn. First thing we'll do is we'll pull up a table. We all know how this works. So we need to find a GW terrain layout. And let's see. Let's go to images. And once I get the layout, I will adjust the screen so that it fits better. You guys don't have to worry about that. Like, I will definitely fix that. I don't want to do this layout again, but I do like this picture just because it's very clean. It's very easy to see. Which layout is this? I don't know which layout this is, but we could probably do that. Let me see. It's this one. Perfect. Bam. Open image in new tab. I also appreciate that they give these measurements. There are no official measurements. It's for real. There are none. And I've had people tell me that that's not right. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is, guys. There's no official GW measurements. It's all roughly, and it's all based off the size of the footprints. That's legitimately what it is. What if we bring up full screen? Will that help? Full size. Ish. We just got to zoom her in. There we go. That's probably a little bit better. Okay. Let's see what kind of, this is terrain layout 3. Let's pull out my pen now. There we go. Oh my gosh, whatever happened, it happened. There's an update. We're not going to update right now. Okay, so let's figure out a mission here. And again, the primaries are also going to maybe change the way the game is played, so I'm not super worried about the primaries. I'm more just worried about what deployment zones we are looking at for this terrain layout. I don't think we've talked much about 10th edition. I don't care. I don't care. Let's look at. I don't think we've talked much about Crucible of Battle, and I don't think we've talked much about. Is it sweeping engagement? Can we do, is layout 3 recommended for this? Let's find out. Boop, boop. And again, if you don't use the Tabletop Battles app, I really feel like you should. It's an exceptional app. It's very good, very handy. It'll let you see an overlay of the terrain on the deployment zone. So again, it's just a really and again, I don't have any kind of sponsorship with Goonhammer or anything. It's just a great app. The whoever developed it did a really good job. So we'll do sweeping engagement. We haven't done that one. I don't think we've ever talked about it. Maybe we have, and I'm just crazy. So we'll do pink. Can I? No, that would be too easy. So we draw a really shitty straight line here because it's not really all that straight. Whoop. So there's our deployment zones. I believe the objectives are just that real goofy. I did too. What a silly goose I am. Games. Let's just jump into my game against John real quick and go change the deployment zone. Boop, 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 boop. Well, there's sweeping engagement. So boop. It is. All right. So we'll do the objectives in blue. So we've got one here. Oh, geez. Let's not do it that way. That was terrible. That's what I get for trying to, like, do it with one hand, right? Oh, there's a pen. I should look at that. I don't think there was a pen. I think I've got an update. Erase. U. Pencil. We'll play with the pen in a little bit. So we've got one here. All right. We've got one that's going to be right about here. And this is why, like I said, I just feel like this app is real helpful because you can use the terrains and everything to kind of better situate what it is you're doing and better position and understand. Okay. Oh, I should not have done that. What a silly goose I am. Well, that's okay. We'll just get rid of that. All right, so and if we assume it's just like take and hold, right? You score for holding objectives, nothing fancy, nothing crazy, because again, the more variables we add, the more we change the dynamic of the game, and we just want basic strategies. Now, for those that know me, right, you know I'm bringing witches, you know I'm bringing incubi. I bring Talos. I don't usually play a lot of Ravagers, and I don't actually bring a lot of Dark Lances. I tend to play more Haywire, and there's a reason for that. I just accept that if I hit demons or if I hit Tyranids and they've got like Nidzilla, right? If they have monsters, that's just going to be a bad matchup for me. I'm going to score what I can, but I'm not going to stress myself out going, oh my gosh, how do I beat this? It just is what it is. Okay? There's nothing I can do that will give this army a good matchup against everything you face. So I've just decided that if you're bringing vehicles, I'm going to make you pick them up. And if you bring monsters, we're going to just let Jesus take the wheel and see what happens. You know, that's just kind of where I've settled with how I've built my lists. So, uh, when I deploy, when I'm playing any army, my deployments tend to be less about where you're at in terms of I need to hide from this or hide from that, and more about where you're at with regard to where are your most mobile things. So a good example is if my opponent's got two trucks or battle wagons. Usually it's trucks right now because battle wagons are a little expensive, so you don't see those as often. But if they've got trucks on the table, which are real cheap and they're real good for what they bring to the table, um, I want to see where those are at because those are probably my first priority in terms of targets. So, you know, if they're really aggressive, they may put a truck here. Man, that seem light? It seems light to me. Oh well. And maybe it's oh, because I have the highlighter. That's why. I'm just a goon. Imagine knowing what you're doing. I I don't. You know, so if they've got a truck and they just slam one here and they maybe like slam one here. Because there are orc players that'll do that because they want those things. If they go first, they want to get them wherever they can, right? And that's one of those where that's good. That's good for me, right? Because now I know exactly where they're at and I can prepare for them. But and again, this is where it gets a little weird because it's hard for me to tell you this is how you do it because I don't know who you're playing against and how they play. But for me, first priority is going to be the trucks for most players. Yep, I know I don't have the full version. So first priority is always going to be the trucks for me. And that's because we're going to try and hamper the mobility of the army because they only get one advance in charge per game unless they bring the banners. And if they bring the banners, it's probably in boiz. And while yeah, they can do a lot of damage, that's not the worst case scenario. The boiz getting an extra invuln and the boiz getting an advance in charge is not the worst thing that could happen to me. So in this situation, I'm probably going to put scourges right here. And it'll probably be the haywire ones. It may be the dark lances. Again, it just depends on deployment. But the reason I'm going to put them here is that I've got this lane locked down. And I can jump them out, shoot, and then jump them back, right? We all know that that's what scourges do. And I do take a unit with haywire, and I do take a unit with, oh, geez, why did I do that? Dark lances. Undo that. Undo that. There we go. We'll just leave that little black dot there for now. So I do take one of each. And then the other unit, with orcs, I probably don't need to put a ton into deep strike. I will put maybe a venom with the Cabalites in deep strike, but the other, I want both scourges on the table the whole game. Okay, I don't want to lose a turn of shooting with them. So then the other scourges might go here. But if all the vehicles, all the transports are loaded up on one side, right? So if they've got their trucks here and they've got their trucks here, I'm just going to swing these scourges back over here for deployment because the scourges are probably going to be the last things I put on the table because I want to be able to see what my opponent's doing. And even if I have way less drops than them, I can at least look at how they've deployed and kind of go, okay. And if I put a unit of scourges down before they put any of their trucks down, and then they're just like, okay, well, I'll just put them over here, that's fine. Like, that's not the end of the world. The scourges are fast enough that we could probably still get them over there. So wherever the trucks are, that's where the scourges are going. I don't care what else they have. The only thing they could have that would make me change my mind is if they've got some Rucka Truck squig buggies, just because those ignore line of sight. And yeah, they'll hit on like 5s or 6s depending on if they move and all these other things. But I'm still just T3 bodies. So I want to make sure I hide from that. And I think they're pretty short range. Let's double check that. Squig buggies. Ranged weapons. No, they're 36. They used to be 18 and 36. Now they're just 36. And it's D6 plus 6 shots with blast, ignore cover, and indirect fire at strength 5, neg 1. So it's one of those, like at 36-inch range, I'm probably going to put the scourges in deep strike then if they have a unit or two of those, especially if I just can't hide from them. But again, that's not the end of the world, simply because I'll have Talos on the table instead. Deep strikes. Let's make a note of that. So deep strikes. Let's switch to pink so we can put it maybe right here. Deep strike. And I'm sorry, I have terrible handwriting anyway, but it's even worse when I'm using a mouse. Can I just venom? There we go. Still not good. I'll deep strike a venom. And then I'll probably strat reserve one unit of 2 Talos. And I'll probably put the other one on the table. And the reason I want one in reserves is because I want that threat. I want my opponent to go, these things hit hard, which they do. They're not like crazy scary, but the fact that it's 3 damage, they will re-roll hit rolls if I spend the pain token, and because I put the gauntlets on them, and they're I think 5 attacks each, so they're either 4 or 5. So they're either getting 8 attacks or 10 attacks in a unit of 2 in melee, and it's just 3 damage. So even if I smack into Mega Knobs, it's going to be 4 up or die, and I'm going to wound them on 3s, probably 4s if it comes down to it, just because they're probably going to go, no, go to hell. I'm not messing with those, -1 to wound. But that's not the worst thing to have happen, because A, you can -1 to wound your Talos, which will mean they'll wound your Talos on 4s. Your Talos have a 3-up save, they have the 5-up feel no pain, so it's one of those where I'd much rather my Talos get kind of tar pitted with Mega Knobs for a turn or two, because I can still shoot out, and I can even just shoot the Mega Knobs if I want to. I'm not likely to hit because I'm hitting on 5s while I'm engaged. But again, if I can get rerolls and they inherently reroll wounds, and any wound I have is just a dead Mega Knob because they're 3 damage dev wounds, that's not the worst case scenario you could have. And you're tying up one of their harder hitting units in order for you to be able to do other things. So I'm getting ahead of myself, and I apologize. Again, if you've been with me before, you guys know how this goes. So we've got Scourges. They're going to be lined up on the trucks. I want both of them on the trucks. And again, we're just assuming that the trucks are like here or maybe even back here. It doesn't matter. Wherever the trucks are, you want Scourges locking down that whole shooting lane. Now, what I might do is I might put Talos down here by themselves. Like I said, because I'm going to put one unit out. Generally speaking, you don't have a ton of shooting to worry about with Orks. Like, sure, they might bring a unit of Flash Gits and Badrock, and it's a lot of dice, and they'll clean up. Like, do not misunderstand. They will clean up. But if they're in a battle wagon or a truck, they're not getting their rerolls from Badrock because it doesn't apply to the truck. It only applies to Badrock. If the truck moves, they're still just hitting on 5s. They can't, let me see how that's worded. Flash Gits. So they won't get the benefit of the extra attacks for targeting the nearest enemy unit because it's only when the model makes the attacks, not the gun. And that's important. So if they're in a truck, they're literally just getting whatever the weapon is. It's 3 shots, strength 6, neg 1, 2 damage. And again, don't misunderstand. It's a lot of dice, and it's still sustained hits, but they're going to hit on 5s if the truck moved. And it's just, they shine when they're on the table with the full rerolls and the bonus attack for being within the closest unit. So if they're in a transport, they're a lot less devastating, so I'm a lot less worried about maybe putting a Talos out there. Now, obviously, they could always move the transport up, disembark, shoot, and that is what it is. You know, there's not a lot you can do about that other than just make sure you take advantage of cover and try to, use your terrain to the best of your ability. I typically bring a unit of racks, and that's just to camp this back objective and to spread them out, right? If I have 5 racks and they're just making a line, now I have a big 9-inch bubble of no deep strikes. So that's the other thing too, though, because they'll probably have Storm Boys. So you're going to want those racks back here just spread out to screen out your little butt, right? And keep things from deep striking in you. My Venoms will typically have the Dark Lance, Splinter Cannon, etc. So it's one of those where I'll also have 15 Kabalites on the table with Splinter Rifles, 3 units of 5, and then the Archon's usually slammed in one of those. And again, that's just how I play. I would probably put like one up in here in case I need to get up to the middle of the board. Like if I get deploy homers turn 1, I can advance them up, etc. But outside of that, right, your deployment is just where are the trucks, Scourges aimed at the trucks. so that if you go first, if there's a cheeky line of sight shot you can do, you do it. If they go first, they're going to have to come out a little bit, and if they don't, that's cool. That keeps them one more turn. You don't have to worry about them. The other thing is, I usually only bring one unit of mandrakes. I know 2 are good. I know 3 are good. It doesn't matter. Again, this is just how I play. The other thing I would do is, especially because a lot of orc players aren't bringing commandos right now, because commandos are kind of expensive. And even if they only have 1 unit of commandos, like that 1 unit can't cover the whole board. So the other thing I would probably do is, again, if they have a fast unit like squigs or the trucks, I'm just spreading the mandrakes out as wide as I can in front of that unit. If they go first, oh well, it's better that they're move blocked. Those trucks move 12. If I can maybe park, let me erase this line. If those trucks are here and I can just park mandrakes 9 inches away in a line here, well, the trucks aren't swinging around this way, and if they do, they're going to be kind of move blocked. So you're trying to force them either up this lane or back around that way. And again, that's not a bad thing. What you're doing is you're using the scourges not necessarily to do damage, but to dictate the flow of the game. So if you put your scourges in a position and your opponent sees that if he moves his trucks out, he's just picking up his trucks, or she, you could try to force them into a direction. What you've done is, again, if you go second, you set yourself up so that if the trucks come down this middle lane, even if they come here, that's fine. Because you should be able to, with 14 inches of movement, come, potentially get a line, jump out, potentially get a line. They shouldn't be able to hide 2 trucks that well without advancing or doing anything else like that. The other good thing about that is even if they have guns in the trucks, they can't use them for Overwatch. Overwatch specifically, and firing deck, I should say, specifically says when you make a shooting attack in the shooting phase. So you can't Overwatch with the units inside the truck with firing deck. It's only used in the shooting phase. So if you poke your handsome little scourges out, you don't have to worry about, if they've got 10 burners in the truck, you don't have to worry about the burners just liquefying your unit before you actually get to use them. And then the other thing is you might, if doing it this way, right, you might consider putting your Talos here so that if they do swing the trucks in, you can now bounce the Talos up through here, throw some cheeky shots, and potentially charge. Just depends on how far up they're willing to go. Now, that being said, that's kind of your turn 1. So if I have this set up and turn 1, this is what we're looking at. And again, it's not that the orc players are bad. It's just that orc players want to get stuck in. So a lot of them will be rather aggressive. They may leave a truck out, and they may leave one just a little bit back so that if they go first, they can get that ramp up here or ramp over here, right? Now, that's not always the case. And again, you got to pick and choose. But I'm just speaking from my experience, because even my buddy, John is his name, even John will occasionally put those transports right out there, knowing that if he gets that die roll go first, he's going to be able to just get as far up the table as possible. Now, that being said, if I go first, we know this distance is 24. We know they move 14. So for me, the Dark Lance Scourges are just poking out, and they're shooting first. Because if the Dark Lance can kill the truck, I don't even have to move the other guys out. And that's a win. Because if I don't have to move them, I don't have to put them in a position to eat a charge. because of the more limited range on the, yep, I did it again. The more limited range on the haywire does mean that you're going to have to put them in a little bit more risk, because this distance is 24. So you're going to have to move them basically maybe to here. It's going to be a lot harder to get them all in range and be able to bounce them back. Not that you can't do it, it's just going to be a little bit harder, and you could end up having to put them in a position to eat that charge. So the first thing I do, like I said, bounce them up, Dark Lance. If the truck dies, hooray, because I'm about not dealing with the trucks. If I can slow down the rush, because that's how, again, my experience has been, Orc players flood the board, sit on objectives, get there as fast as they can. If I can slow that down, I will. So again, if I go first, that's the first priority. That takes priority over scoring points. Now, obviously your secondaries for the first turn are going to also dictate what you do. I would make sure I have a 5-man of Kabalites with splinter rifles over here, simply so that I get investigate signals. For example, turn 1, I can come over here and grab it. I have a unit here, so I can come over here and grab it, and then I just get 4 points, and that's good enough for me. I'm not going to stress out about it. If I get engaged on all fronts turn 1, if I go first, I'll get 3. That's good enough because of the mandrakes. If I go second, man, there's a good chance I just don't score it, and that's okay, because what I want to do when I play against orcs is I want every turn you have to make a very hard thought decision about whether or not you want to declare your WA. And if I can make it to where you actually have to think about it every turn, then I'm doing it right. If I position in a way where you're just like, yep, this is the turn, hit the gas and go, either I've baited you very well, or I've put myself out of position and I'm about to lose a whole lot of my army. Now, that being said, for the most part, again, most orc lists right now don't have a ton of shooting. So I'm probably prepping witches to come up here. And they probably are going to sit there. Again, there's a lot of factors here that we don't know. But if they've got squigs, I'm not putting the witches where the squigs are if I can avoid them. I'll put the incubi where the squigs are, and I'll just try to plan to charge with my incubi. Like, it doesn't always work that way, but that's the route I want to go. Because the incubi will wound them on 4s, and it's 2 damage each, and it's -2, and then old Drazar is basically 6 up or die, except for the feel no pains, right? So it's one of those where, through weight of dice, 30 attacks, hitting on 3s, re-rolling, we're looking at about 26, 27 hits, which is going to be about 14 saves, 13 saves. At 6s, they're going to make 2 of those on average, which means we're looking at 22 to 23 points of damage. And then at a 5-up feel no pain, we're negating about 6 of that, 7 of that. So they're taking 15 points of damage on average, which is 5 squig hogs dead. So that's why I want the incubi to go there. Now, there's a good chance that they use their 2 CP to fight on death, or they use their 1 CP to -1 to wound them, which drastically changes that math. But there's not really a lot you can do about that, right? And you'll still kill some, and you could potentially live through the counter swings depending on dice and everything else, and you can always -1 to hit your boys to try and mitigate some of those counter swings. But if they -1 to wound, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to accept it. And when you send those incubi, you don't want to send them so that they're the only thing fighting. Right? You want to hit like 2 or 3 different units with witches and incubi, or maybe Talos. And actually the Talos wouldn't be a terrible thing to send into the squigs. I think they have They have the anti-vehicle. I don't play them. They were never one of my favorite units. Yeah, they have anti-vehicle, anti-monster, but they're not dev wounds. So they're going to wound you on 4s with 3 attacks each, right? So it's not the end of the world. Now, the extra attacks, the Jaws and Saddle gets, they're going to wound you on 5s. But it is just, again, a lot of dice. It's 6 dice per guy. So it's one of those, like, the Talos aren't necessarily the worst thing to put into them, but you don't want to send them alone. You want to send them in tandem with the Incubi if you're going to send them. Because then it becomes, do I fight the Talos? Do I fight the Incubi? The -1 to wound becomes a little less relevant because now we've got Strength 8 going into T3 or T7, so we're wounding on 4s, but again, it's 3 damage attacks. So that being, like again, that's how I would kind of work with them. But as far as what we're talking about here, again, I'm sorry, we do kind of get all over the place. You want your Scourges, like I said, aimed at the trucks. If I go first, hopefully I kill that truck with the Dark Lances. If I don't, I send the Haywire up as little as possible so that I can bounce back. Like, if I can send them here, get in range in a line here, and then still move back to at least be on the footprint, that's what I would do. And between the Haywire and the Dark Lances, you should kill 1 truck. It doesn't always work that way, but you should, right? I would, like I said, kind of prep my witches here. I would have Cabalites here, and honestly, for the first 2 turns, turn 1 and turn 2, I'm going to plan to only score 1 secondary both of those turns. I'm going to plan to just discard the other one, get the CP, and start banking my resources, because most Orc players are going to declare that WA either turn 2 or turn 3. If you play it right, you can force it on turn 3, and if you force it on turn 3, you should be in a good position. The other thing I'm going to tell you, this right here, guys, this is a trap. Orcs will beat you on the middle of the table every game. Every game. So don't fall for that trap. You could keep your Dark Lance Scourges over here, again, just to kind of fly out, lock down this lane, fly back, and that's not wrong either. Those are the 2 spots for them, but like I said, priority targets right here, just because most players run in trucks. Knobs, let's talk about knobs. A lot of times those knobs are going to be on trucks. They're not going to be on foot, which is why we want to tag those trucks, right? Don't want to mess with them. Those trucks with the knobs make them a lot more dangerous because your Orc players are just going to advance them turn 1. There's no shooting that they need to go out of here, and unless you give that truck a charge, they're just going to advance it to get as far up the table as they can to protect their knobs and to get them as close as they can to combat. So, that being said, that's why we target those trucks first. If they've got Weird Boys, which is another good gimmick, right? The 30 boys with the Weird Boy and the War Boss, that's actually pretty easy to work around. Because of the way I've built lists, again, that's fairly easy to work around because your Mandrakes will screen out that to jump, right? If you put them here, and then really you don't even have to put them there. If you bring them back to like midboard, let's go ahead and erase this. You can just bring them here. Well, you've got a 9-inch bubble here, and a 9-inch bubble here, and a 9-inch bubble here. I would probably have a unit of Cabalites here, or you could put the Cabalites on the objective and the racks up here. It doesn't really matter, but one of those 2. And that's going to protect, right? If you put the racks like this, you've now got this overlapping screen that keeps the Weird Boys out of here, and it forces them somewhere over here. And that's not the end of the world. You know, they can move block you, and that's fine, But if your Scourges are right here, that frees your Scourges up to still do what they need to do. And if they know you've got a Venom and Deep Strike, and they know you've got a unit of Talos in strategic reserves, that will also help kind of keep them a little bit more honest. They're going to be like, okay, both of those units could potentially put out a shitload of damage. Both of those units could do wreak a lot of havoc to me. So I don't want them to be able to come in back here. I don't want them to be able to like hit me here or maybe get right here so that next turn they can come tag the objective. Because a lot of times what's on that back objective is just Gretchen. So they're not going to want you coming back here, shooting that Gretchen off the table, and then taking away their ability to generate an additional command point. And if it's a mission where you can score that objective, you've also just taken a unit out of the game that doesn't really do anything besides on a 4-up give a command point, and then just score points. Like, that's all Gretchen do. They farm points on backfield objectives, and they generate a command point every other turn, or every other command phase, whatever. Because it's on a 4-up. So they're going to do something to protect those Gretchen a little bit, even if that's just holding back for a turn because you have these things in Deep Strike. And that's why the Venom goes in Deep Strike, okay? Because when the Venom comes out, a lot of Orks are very infantry heavy. They've got boiz, they've got knobs. Hey, knobs are -1 to wound. Guess what doesn't give a shit? Splinter cannons. So that's why, again, we pop those trucks first if the knobs are in them, get the knobs on the table. Splinter cannons have anti-infantry 3-up. Now it's 5-up or die for the knob. With a gun that hits on 3s from this Venom or 4s from the guys inside, but you're going to get 9 total shots, right? So, again, with 9 total shots hitting on 3s, well, 6 total shots from the Venom hitting on 3s. You're going to get 4 hits. On average, one of those is a 6. You're going to re-roll your fails because you're going to use that token. And basically what's going to happen is you're going to get 6 to 7 hits on average, which means you're going to get 5 wounds on average, which means you're going to kill 4 knobs on average. And then you're going to do it again with the splinter cannon that's on the inside. And you're going to kill another 1 or 2. And then you're going to do it with the splinter rifle that's on the inside. And it won't probably kill the knob, but you're going to put that damage on the knob. So, that's, again, here's how you got to approach it. They might have something that looks pants-shittingly terrifying, but that's all distraction, right? When I went to Tampa, I ran Orks. And, man, I put knobs on bikes. And we're going to get to bikes in a minute. But I put knobs on bikes on the table, and people freaked out. They freaked out because they'd never seen them for the most part. They freaked out because they hit really hard, and they freaked out because they're really fast. But that was what I needed. Like, I would send the knobs up, people would overreact to the knobs on bikes, and that freed my regular knobs to get out and go where they needed to go and do the damage that they needed to do. The other unit you are going to have to watch out for as an elf player are any of the bikes. They will do so much damage to your army because they move 12 inches. They have assault weapons. They can, if they have a war boss on bike, auto advance 6 or the war trike, either one. So it's one of those like they can cover a lot of ground. They're T6, 3 wounds, 4 for the knob, 4-up save, 6-up invuln, and they can benefit from the -1 to wound strat. They're still just boiz if they have the regular ones, but it's still strength 4 attacks at -1 AP. So they will just mulch you, but the guns are actually better than you think because they get, I think it's 5 shots a bike with assault that just hits on 5s. I don't think they're sustained off the top of my head, but they are twin linked, so they'll also reroll wounds, and if they're in rapid fire range, they get an additional pip of AP. So the bikes can actually do a lot of damage, and they can be hard for us to shift depending on what we've taken and how we've built. Historically, what I've tried to do again, and it's one of those where it depends on what your opponent's bringing, but if I were playing against somebody who brings lists like I do, where they're super bike heavy, That's where my Talos are going, because the bikes aren't going to kill the Talos in melee. They'll chip some wounds off here and there, but the Talos is just going to be invuln or die in melee. And again, I get to still shoot out. They don't get to shoot out. They don't get to fall back and charge. They don't get to do anything like that. So it's one of those where it's hard. Again, it's just really hard to be like, this is the order you do this in without knowing what you're playing against. But if we've got bikes, order of priority is going to be trucks, bikes, and then probably everything else. That is how I would approach them. There's, like I said, there's going to be just a few things that you can't really do anything about. Like squig buggies, you can't do anything about. The other thing is they have low leadership, so you can force a lot of battle shock tests that are probably going to fail. And that will benefit you because that shuts off their ability to get some of those strats. You know, they are leadership 7, so you're looking at battle shocking on a, like 6 or lower. So it's one of those where if you can kill enough guys to force battle shock tests, or if you can get incubi and stuff into them to force those battle shock tests, they probably won't fail. But they will give me a second because I'm getting stared at like some sort of ghoul. They will. Sorry about that. If you can get them to fail, that shuts off the -1 to wound. That shuts off the ability to interrupt. That does all this. So again, if you can force them into battle shocks, they might not fail them every turn, but even just failing one can mean a world of difference for what's about to happen. So if you can force it, do it. And like I said, even the war bosses have bad leadership. I think the war bosses are 7. I don't think they are 6. Let's double check that. No, the war bosses are 6. Everything else is 7. So it's just one of those where these are things to keep in mind. Your splinter weapons are going to be amazing. Splinter rifles will mulch boys because their T5 and their -1 to wound strat won't matter. Splinter cannons will do the Lord's work into knobs because they're 2 wounds with a 4-up save. So you're pushing them to a 5-up, and it's 5-up or die. If they've got a pain boy in the unit of knobs instead of a war boss, sure, they become more resilient, but they don't get the +1 to hit, and they don't get the -1 to wound. So you're probably not seeing that as often. I do know a couple players that run the named pain boy, Mad Doc, and that's just for the fallback and charge. So it's one of those, like, you may see it, and again, you still want to send those splinter cannons into them. Shredders are going to be your friend. Shredders are going to wound boys on 3s because they're strength 6. Shredders are going to wound trucks or bikes on 4s, and bikes still just have a 4-up save. So it's one of those where if you just put enough saves on them, they'll fail them, and that's the name of the game. Where I think a lot of Drukhari players probably struggle is I think it's I'm bringing every Dark Lance I can, so I don't have a high volume of shooting. I don't know what everybody plays, but I know from what I've seen with other players, there's not a lot of players out there that are bringing 20 witches. Whereas, like, I'm bringing 20 witches. I love them. They fit the way I play. The witches themselves are they're not great, but the characters you could put in them are pretty good. The succubus will just mulch boys. And unless they've declared a WA, she will mulch knobs. Let's do some math on that. So the succubus, right? And if you spend the pain token on her, she fights first. So really, what's going to happen is if you play your witches defensively, which is why I said I'm going to put these right here, I want to get charged because I'm going to get to fight first. Whether I have Lilith or whether I have the succubus, I'm going to get to fight first. I'm giving the succubus her enhancement every time, which gives her a bonus attack and an extra pip of AP, and then it gives her another attack and another pip of AP if she's empowered, and I'm just going to empower her every game. Like every turn. She's getting empowered if she's in combat. Don't care. She has sustained hits. She gives sustained hits to the witches. And she gets 6 attacks, but because of how I play her, she'll have 8 attacks. So let's math this out. If we've got 8 attacks hitting on 2s, we're going to average 7 hits, which we're actually going to average 8 hits because of the sustained. Now we're going to re-roll that miss, and then we're going to average 9 hits. Now really, depending on what my roll looks like, I may end up just fishing for 6s, and that could spike. It's more likely to spike up than it is to spike down because we're just hitting on 2s. But we're going to average 8 to 9 hits. Now, with anti-infantry 3 up, we're going to average 6 wounds. Now, unless they've declared a WA, literally everything you're engaged with that an orc player has is just going through with very few exceptions. Like, obviously, if they have the big mech with KFF, then they don't just go through. If they've got the banner and they've declared their banner WA, they don't just go through. But unless they have an invuln, which a lot of orc units don't except for the vehicles, they're just punching through. At neg 4, they're just punching through. And you could actually just force Meganobs to a 6 up that way. So she's on average killing 2 Meganobs, roughly. So she's very good by herself. Now, what she does, though, is she also makes the witches a little bit better, and those witches are going to help as well. So, again, like I played against my buddy John not that long ago, and let me see if I can actually, I'll pull that up real quick. Let me see if I can pull that up. Because that was a rough game. He scored well. It was 95-83. But it was really just, yeah, 95-83. I ended up going first, and I usually, like in 10th edition, I have a worse go first win rate than I do a go second. But this is exactly what I did. I tagged his truck early, tried to hamper his mobility. His second turn, he sent no, he went first. Sorry, I'm looking at that wrong. So his turn 1, he had to move the trucks up, got rid of one early. The second one, he pushed up a little too far. I charged the Talos into it. And the reason I charged the Talos into it was, hey, it's not going anywhere. Now, if he wants to charge me with what's inside, he's got to get it out and go charge me. He doesn't get to just send it wherever he wants to. Now, it sat there for an extra turn or two, but that's okay, because I think it was Berna's in there anyway, so it was just not the end of the world, because I just kept my infantry away from it, and then just slowly used the Talos to grind everything down. I give my Talos the Haywire, and I give them the Liquefier, and I give them the Gauntlets. The Haywire's twin-linked, so I can throw 4 shots out of a unit of 2, I can empower them for re-rolling, and then they just, like, any wounds that happen to vehicles just happen. They don't get a save. And then the liquefiers are really good for just making sure we clean up some of that infantry. You know, so it's one of those where I tend to run things either hyper specialized or very generalist. I don't tend to run them in between. You know, like witches are very specialized. Incubi are very specialized. My Talos are a Swiss Army knife. My Cabalites are specialized on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, I don't really have a ton of, like, this is just in between. So, we've got, like I said, you want to take out the trucks first. You want to take out the bikes second if you can. But if your opponent's not giving you the bikes, don't go out of your way to take them. It's not the end of the world. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you, right, let's clear some of this up, is when you go to start taking objectives and you go to start doing things, I did it again, you silly goose. You go to start doing things, there's a couple things you need to remember. You can disembark from your Venoms and then get back in. They have a special rule for that. And the reason I'm telling you that is because if you want to take this objective here, right, but they've got something you want to shoot here, and let's say you have cleanse, you can either, if your venom's close enough, you can either bring your venom here, disembark with your boys, cleanse with your boy. No, you can't cleanse with your boys. You'd have to shoot with them. So you could fly your venom here, disembark your boys on the outside, cleanse with the venom, shoot with the boys, and then in the fight phase, get back into the venom. Because the venom has that special rule where you get to hop back in that and do some hood rat shit. Like, it is one of those where every time I do that, I have to walk the player through it. Not because they don't believe me, but they're just like, what rule does this venom not have, right? Because I get to break squads in half. But at the end of the fight phase, if there's no models engaged with this transport, you can select a unit that has 6 or fewer models that is wholly within 6. And obviously normal restrictions. And if they're not engaged, you can hop back in. So it's one of those, like, I've had to walk people through it. Played a Space Marine player. Did this exact maneuver to him. He had, I think it was a Redemptor right here. And I had the Venom positioned in a way where he couldn't engage it because of the wall. And then I just put like the blaster and the Dark Lance on the outside of the wall and everybody else on the inside because that's the only things I wanted to shoot. Did some damage to him, hopped back in the Venom, and then he couldn't do anything about it. And he was just like, oh, why does that work that way? And he wasn't rude or mean or anything. It was just like, hey, wait a second. Why? So I had to show him, and he was just like, oh, okay. So it's just one of those, like, these are the things that you got to remember, like when you're playing against orcs. Sometimes it's going to be better to place that transport down, disembark your boys, throw all your dice out from your boys, hop back into the transport because A, it's going to get you a little bit closer because of that 3-inch disembark, and B, your boys are now eligible to use strats that they wouldn't be eligible to use inside the Venom, or if they have the Archon with them, they'll get the Archon rerolls because they're on the table. So, like, these are just all things to kind of keep in mind. Let's see. We've talked about how to work around knobs. We've talked about how to work around trucks. We've talked a little bit about squigs. Squigs are just one of those things where if you're playing against squigs, if you are playing against squigs and you are playing the traditional Dark Lance spam, you are probably going to have an easier time than I do. Because of the fact that I don't bring a lot of Dark Lances, I will probably just kind of do what I can to mitigate the squig's movement for the first couple turns. You know, I won't charge them with my Raider, but I might park the Raider right in front of them but after I disembark my Incubi. Or honestly, depending on what the table looks like, I might, if they're here, for example, I might try to move block them with the Raider and then disembark the Incubi in a way that they can't try to charge my Incubi. Or I might disembark the Incubi, then move the Raider up, then advance the Incubi and try to get them in position for a counter charge. Because your opponent is going to either charge the Raider because it's right in their way, or they're going to have to try to move around it. And that's another thing that you got to understand, right? And the other thing, the biggest thing for me is try to play half the board if possible. And I know I've talked about that before, but let's talk about it again. Half the board if possible. So if we draw a big line right down the middle of this here board, as we deploy, I'm going to look at how my opponent is set up. I'm going to look at what units are where, and I am going to pick one side of the board or the other. That's it. Whatever side I pick is going to be the side I focus on. So again, if the trucks are still up here like we've been talking about, this is probably the side I'm picking because I know they need to go away. I want to focus on that side, and I want to force that player to have to readjust what they're doing. So I might filter 1 or 2 units over here and there, just to maybe hold objectives, pull some of my opponent's units to that side of the board. But the primary focus is going to be this whole half of the table. And basically, I'm going to say, this is mine. You can have everything else. And I'm going to try to pick you off over the first 2 turns, maybe 3, right? Like, I'm going to just try to pick you apart. And again, I'm going to stage those witches. So if I know that you can't shoot them off the table, that's where they're going. Because if you charge them, I will make you pay. You might kill them, but it is not going to be a good trade for you. Because I'm going to have another unit of witches ready. I'm going to have some cab lights ready to shoot you. Like, I'm going to make sure that whatever you send into them takes so much damage that it is basically useless for the rest of the game. So we're going to have the witches there. We're going to focus on picking off everything, and we're going to focus on maybe getting a unit of cab lights here at some point, just slowly moving up. Like I said, turn 1, turn 2, I may score 5 points in primaries from holding 1 objective. And that's where Drukhari have kind of shifted. They've gone from being this like very aggressive, get in your face early, do as much damage as you can kind of army that they were in 9th, right? Like that was the big play in 9th, was to take the Blackheart, get your 1 extra stage of power from pain, get advance and charge, slam things early, and then score points while people just kind of grind through the quagmire. And that's not really how I played them even in 9th. Honestly, the way I've played Drukhari hasn't changed a ton. I've just brought more guns in 10th than I would have in 9th. That's the biggest change. But yeah, so it's one of those where I'm playing for turns 3, 4, and 5. Turn 1 and 2, my opponent is going to get points. And let's look at that, actually. So, turn 1, John got area denial. This is the orc player I was talking about. 3 points. Cool, man. You can have the middle of the board. Don't give a shit. Turn 1, and he got investigate signals. And the mission we had, he was set up so that if he drew it, he was going to get it. And it's a smart play. There's no reason not to. Turn 2, he scored 15 in primaries, and I believe this was just on take and hold. My turn 1, I also actually ended up drawing investigate signals and overwhelming force. Fortunately, like I was able to just shoot like his trucks. I think I killed, because I think he had 3 trucks, and I think I killed 2 of them turn 1, and they were both on objectives. So I got 5 points there. Investigate signals, I got my 4, because again, we just both set up for it, and we both happened to luck out and draw it. But then turn 2, I got 5 points in primaries, because I didn't take those objectives, because I didn't want to move up, give him reason turn 2 to just be like, this is the turn I declare my WH, and then he just comes at me full force. So turn 2, he gets behind enemy lines and overwhelming force, and he gets it, right? Like, that's fine. And actually, I think I did have 2 units on objectives, but it was just like a unit of cab lights on 2 different objectives. And it was just the shitty splinter rifle guys. Because I had to get up there, I had to do something to kind of force his hand, but he's not going to declare his WH for 2 units of cab lights. And they got behind enemy lines, and he made like a bonkers charge to get it. We were playing hammer and anvil, so the deployment zones are real big, and he made a really good charge with like 2 units. One of them hit my witches, and he had to hit the witches, if I remember right, to get it. And the witches shredded that unit. But he still managed to get behind enemy lines. But then my turn 2, I drew deploy teleport homers and no prisoners, and man, I capped no prisoners. Because then he was kind of strung out, didn't have his invuln because he didn't declare his WA, and I just chewed through a lot of his army that turn. And then I was able to get units on objectives. Like my Talos, for example, were on that objective. And I basically had pushed him off of a couple of objectives and pulled him out of position. And then his turn 3, he scored 10 in primaries. So he's already got 25 in primaries, right? Whereas I've got 5. But then he gets deploy teleport homer, which he could do in my deployment zone because he's still got units in my deployment zone. And then he's got defense stronghold, which I couldn't get to it. That's fine. Take and hold. I scored 15 that turn, though. And that was big because that was he couldn't bully me off of the objectives because I had really crippled his ability to move. I had taken his mobility way down. And then I got secure no man's land and area denial. And I got little area denial, and that's all he got too. I think my mandrakes were within range, and he just wasn't willing to charge the mandrakes to pull himself out of position and get that far into my deployment or into my territory. But then, yeah, so I get my 8 points there. Well, then we bounce back to him, and he's got 10 points. So now he's up to 35, right? But then he draws bring it down or extend battle lines and bring it down. And he kills, I think, a Talos. And then extend battle lines he got. But then I get 10 in primaries because I'm slow. I'm ramping, right? I'm not just committing everything. We're ramping up. We're sending in waves. And then I get extend battle lines and I get bring it down, but I've already killed all of his vehicles. But I don't discard it at the beginning. I discard it at the end so I can get the command point. But then I get cleanse, and then I get engage on all fronts. I actually got capture enemy outpost, but I ended up spending the CP to discard that because I knew I couldn't get it. So I discarded that and picked up engage, and then I got 8 points. So it's one of those where his last turn, he drew assassination and no prisoners, and he was just, I had robbed him of so many of his resources that he couldn't score either. So it's one of those where, you know, you've got to hamper and cripple their movement, and you've got to do it in a way that keeps you far enough away from them that every turn they're like, what do I really get from declaring my WA? And that's the big thing, right? Because once they declare it, that's it. They're done. It's gone. You don't have to worry. So if you, and that's what helped. He didn't declare until I think it was turn 3 that game, and when he declared it, it was largely unimportant. It didn't matter. He didn't have a lot that he could advance and charge with. The things that he could advance and charge were hitting things that I wanted him to hit. So it was like, okay, you get to advance and charge, but you got to advance and charge into my witches. You get to advance and charge, but you got to tag my Talos. You know, so that was the big thing. So understanding the approach is what's important. Make sure you cripple their mobility, and you've got to send waves, do everything slow, do it staggered. So I don't know how helpful this is. Obviously, if you have questions, you can drop them in the comments, or you can, if you're in the chat, you can always ask. I know there are people watching, which is cool, but not people chatting, so I'm guessing it's a lot of people at work or getting ready to watch football or something, and that's also fine, but I can see the views right now and the viewers, and it's cool. I appreciate everybody that's watching. We're going to wrap up here. If this helps, let me know in the comments. If there's a better way I could address this, let me know in the comments. You know, I like doing these live because I like being able to, when we have more people in the chat, getting that discussion going. I like doing these live because it's easier. I don't want to say easier. It's better for my brain. Like if I sit down and I draw all this out, I'm too easily distracted. And whereas if I'm live, I make sure I've got things away from me. There's no distractions. It's much easier for me to focus on what I'm doing. So it's easier for my brain when I'm live, and then it's better for me when I'm live because I get that interaction when we have more people in the chat. That's going to do it for today. Again, let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's something I missed. And let me know if there's a way I can improve upon this type of video. If you prefer it to be a regular video and not a live, let me know. It's easier for me, but if it's more beneficial for you, obviously that's what I need to do. So, big thanks to everybody for watching. Hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope it helps you. If you've got, some list questions or like unit specific questions, like, hey man, I want to use this specific unit, but how do I use this unit when I'm playing against orcs? Or hey, you didn't discuss when they bring this unit. How do we counter this unit? And there may just be no good answer, and sometimes that's the case. But I will do my best to tell you what I know and to share my skill and knowledge with you. Outside of that, I hope you guys have a great Sunday. If you're in America, have fun watching the NFL games if you're a football fan. If you're not in America, have fun not watching football games, I guess, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's soccer or hockey. I don't know. Do you watch? I'm sure somebody watches hockey in Europe. I know they do in like Russia. So, but again, big thanks. Enjoy your Sunday. Hope it's peaceful. Hope it's calm. Have a good one.